Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Always a pleasure.
You know, we like to keep our finger on the pulse of all things strange and unusual.
I do try to.
And recently an interview popped up on News Nation with Jake Barber, and boy, did he have some stories to tell.
Yeah, I saw that one making the rounds.
So we figured we'd bring you along with us as we kind of pick it apart.
Love it. Let's do it.
Now, Jake had two main stories that really caught our attention. One was this, what he called a non-human intelligence egg.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, and then this whole thing with these missing hard drives that ended up at the bottom of a lake.
Two very different mysteries, but both very intriguing.
So let's start with that egg story.
Okay.
So Jake's flying in a helicopter at night, and he spots this large white object just kind of hanging there in the air.
Spooky.
Yeah, and of course his first thought is aliens, right?
Well, I mean, wouldn't you?
Probably. But then this Canadian researcher, Josh Bertrand, chimes in and says, hey, maybe it's an aerogel vacuum buoyancy drone.
Ah, yes, it's right.
And I'm like, what? Drones that float using a vacuum? That sounds like something straight out of Star Trek.
It does sound a bit far-fetched.
Yeah. But apparently there's some real science behind it.
There is, yeah, the basic principles of buoyancy.
Okay.
Think about how a hot air balloon works. The hot air inside is lighter than the surrounding air, so it floats.
Right.
Well, a vacuum is essentially nothing, right? Which makes it the lightest possible thing.
Okay, so you're saying if you could build something strong enough to hold a vacuum inside, it would just float.
Exactly. Theoretically, anyway. The problem has always been building a structure that can withstand the pressure of the atmosphere while containing a vacuum. You need something incredibly strong, but also incredibly lightweight.
So for centuries, people knew this was possible in theory, but they couldn't actually make it work.
That's right. They just didn't have the right materials.
So what changed?
Well, in the 1920s, this stuff called aerogel was invented.
Aerogel.
Yeah, it's this super light, porous material, almost like a sponge, but 1,000,000 times lighter.
1,000,000 times lighter.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff. And its unique structure makes it strong enough to contain a vacuum without collapsing.
Okay, so this aerogel is what makes these vacuum drones possible.
Exactly. Now, regular aerogel is pretty fragile, not ideal for building large structures. But then they came up with this metallic aerogel called airloy. It's much stronger and more durable, opens up a lot of possibilities.
Okay, so we're talking about building large drones that can float using a vacuum.
Yeah, that's the idea.
That's pretty mind-blowing. But how does this tie back to what Jake saw?
Well, he described the object as large, white, egg-shaped. And there's actually footage that shows it being lowered from a helicopter using ropes and a sling.
So you're saying it's not just some random object floating in the sky. Someone's deliberately deploying and retrieving this thing.
It seems that way.
Yeah.
And that makes you wonder who's behind this. It's entirely possible that agencies like the NRO, the folks who love their cutting-edge surveillance tech, could be experimenting with these aerogel drones. They'd be incredibly stealthy. Could stay airborne for extended periods, perfect for monitoring sensitive areas.
So you're thinking this alien egg could actually be a top-secret government drone?
It's a strong possibility.
Huh. Well, that's kind of a letdown, but also incredibly cool. Makes you wonder what other futuristic technology is being developed that we don't even know about.
Right. It really does.
Okay, but before we get too deep into that, let's switch gears and talk about those missing hard drives.
Sure, let's do it.
Because that story's just as intriguing, even if it doesn't involve, potential alien tech.
Definitely.
So to recap, Jake found these Panasonic Toughbooks on mountaintops. Those super durable laptops they use in field work?
Right.
And these laptops were probably connected to sensors collecting data Who knows the kind of data?
To be anything.
Yeah, but the hard drives, the part that stores all the information, were missing.
And they turned up later in a box at the bottom of a lake.
Yeah, exactly. It's like someone was trying to send a message, but what message?
Good question.
Did your contacts in the security world have any insights?
They did.
Yeah.
And they offered up two very different scenarios, both with pretty significant implications.
Okay, I'm all ears, lamb on me.
All right, so scenario one, the actors behind this are a foreign nation. They remove the hard drives, copy the data for their own purposes, and then they leave them underwater as a way of showing their capabilities. Essentially saying, hey, we can access your sensitive information and there's not much you can do about it.
Oh, wow. That's a chilling thought.
It is. It really highlights the vulnerability of our data in an increasingly interconnected world.
Yeah, that's a scary thought. Okay, so that's scenario one, international espionage. What's the other possibility?
This one might surprise you. The second scenario involves UFO enthusiasts.
Wait, you're kidding, right? UFO enthusiasts. What would they want with government hard drives?
Well, they might believe that these sensors are actually monitoring alien activity.
Okay.
So they could have taken the hard drives as trophies, or maybe to prevent the government from collecting evidence of extraterrestrial life. Leaving them underwater could be their way of sending a message back saying, we're on to you.
That's a wild theory. So we've got two potential culprits here. A foreign government trying to flex its muscles, or dedicated UFO believers taking matters into their own hands. Both scenarios raise some serious questions about security and the lengths people will go to for their beliefs.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating case study in human behavior and motivation.
This is already so much to unpack, and we haven't even scratched the surface of the ethical implications.
No, we haven't. There's a lot to consider here.
Okay, so we've got government drones disguised as alien eggs, missing hard drives with mysterious motives, and a whole lot of unanswered questions. Where do we go from here?
Well, I think it's time to step back and look at the bigger picture. What do these stories tell us about the world we live in? What can we learn from them?
I love that approach. Let's shift gears and talk about the broader implications of what we've discussed so far. What does this all mean for you, our listener?
All right, let's connect this to your everyday life. If we assume these aerogel drones are real and they're being used for surveillance, it raises some serious concerns about privacy and government overreach.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, imagine a world where these silent, invisible drones are constantly watching us collecting data without our knowledge or consent.
It's a pretty unsettling thought, like something straight out of a dystopian sci-fi movie.
It really is, and it highlights the importance of transparency and oversight when it comes to these kinds of technologies. We need to be having these open and honest conversations about the potential benefits and risks, and we need to make sure there are safeguards in place to protect our individual liberties.
Absolutely. We can't just blindly trust that these technologies will be used responsibly. We need to be informed and engaged citizens demanding accountability from our governments and tech companies.
Exactly. Now let's shift our focus to those missing hard drives, regardless of who was behind it. A foreign nation or UFO enthusiasts. It exposes a critical vulnerability in our data security systems. Think about all the sensitive information we store digitally. Personal data, financial records, government secrets. If someone can just walk away with that information, it puts all of us at risk.
Okay, yeah, that's a really good point. We rely on digital security so much without even thinking about it. So what can we do to protect ourselves?
Well, on a personal level, it's important to be aware of the risks and take steps to secure your own data. Strong passwords, two-factor authentication, being cautious about what you share online. These are all basic steps you can take to make yourself a less attractive target.
Right, basic security hygiene.
Exactly. But it's not just about individual responsibility. We also need to be pushing for stronger data protection laws and regulations. Companies and governments need to be held accountable for keeping our data safe.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to protect ourselves, but we also need systemic changes to ensure that our data is being handled responsibly at every level.
Absolutely. And this brings us back to a common thread we see in both these stories, the rapid pace of technological advancement. We're living in an era where new technologies are emerging faster than our ability to fully understand their implications.
It's true. It's like we're constantly playing catch-up, trying to figure out how to use these tools ethically and responsibly while they're already being deployed and integrated into our lives.
It's a challenge, for sure. But I think it's a challenge we need to embrace.
Yeah.
We need to be willing to learn and adapt to have those tough conversations and to work together to ensure that technology serves humanity, not the other way around.
I like that technology serving humanity. It's a good reminder that we're not just passive bystanders in this technological revolution. We have a say in how these tools are developed and used.
We absolutely do. Now, you mentioned earlier that there were some fascinating details in the source material that we haven't touched on yet. What caught your eye?
Well, I noticed that Jake's initial sighting of the egg was at night through night vision goggles,
Uh-huh.
but then later we see footage of it being lowered from a helicopter in broad daylight. It's almost like two separate events.
That's a great observation. And it suggests that there might have been multiple instances of this egg being retrieved, not just a one-time occurrence.
Right. Which raises even more questions, doesn't it? Like, what were they doing with it? Why the secrecy? Are there even more of these drones out there?
It certainly adds another layer of intrigue to the story. It's possible that we're simply conducting multiple tests and retrievals, but it also leaves room for speculation. Could there be more to this than meets the eye?
Okay, so we've got government drones, missing hard drives, possible international intrigue, multiple encounters with this mysterious egg, and a whole lot of unanswered questions. I don't know about you, but I'm finding this whole thing incredibly fascinating.
Me too. It's like a real-life mystery unfolding right before our eyes. And it's a reminder that the world is full of surprises, even in an age where we think we figured everything out.
Absolutely. And you know what? There's one more detail that I found particularly interesting, and it might just connect these two seemingly separate stories in a way we haven't considered yet. Remember how Jake mentioned finding those tough books on remote mountaintops?
Yes, the locations where those sensors and hard drives were found were quite peculiar.
Remember how Jake mentioned finding those tough books on remote mountaintops?
Yes, the locations where those sensors and hard drives were found were quite peculiar.
Exactly. What if those mountaintop sensors were actually part of a larger surveillance system? Maybe even designed to track and monitor these aerogel drones.
Now that's an intriguing thought. It would make sense, wouldn't it? If you're developing and testing these advanced drones, you'd want a way to track their movements, collect data on their performance.
Right, and placing sensors on mountaintops would give you a wide range of coverage. So maybe those missing hard drives weren't just about the data they contained, but also about disrupting the government's ability to monitor these secret drones.
It's a possibility worth considering. It would certainly add another layer of complexity to the situation.
It's like a puzzle, and we're just starting to put the pieces together. But even with all this speculation, we have to come back to the central question. What does this all mean? What are the implications of these events, both for those directly involved and for the wider world?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah,
And I think it boils down to a few key takeaways. First, we're seeing a rapid acceleration of technological development, pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible.
no doubt.
Second, these advancements are raising complex ethical and societal questions that we need to address head-on.
We can't just ignore those.
No, we can't. And third, we're living in an increasingly interconnected world where actions taken in one part of the globe can have ripple effects across continents and impact the lives of millions.
It's a lot to wrap our heads around, but
Mhm.
it's important that we don't shy away from these conversations. The future is being shaped right now, and we all have a role to play in ensuring it's a future we want to live in.
I couldn't agree more. And I think the first step is awareness. The more we know about these emerging technologies, the better equipped we are to engage in meaningful discussions about their development and use.
So to our listeners, we leave you with this challenge. Stay curious, stay informed, and don't be afraid to ask the tough questions.
And remember, the world is full of mysteries. Some we may never fully solve. But the pursuit of knowledge, the quest for understanding, that's what makes life so exciting.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time for another exploration into the depths of the unknown.